Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 10th of November, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. My co-host in studio today is Ben Rubin. Welcome to the programme, Ben.
Thank you, Mike.
And joining us by video link are Sandi, Adams and Diane Rasmussen. Now, later in the programme, we'll have more from COP30, some news, some of it good, related to online censorship, and we'll be taking a look at Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill. But we're going to begin with the chaos at the BBC. Because, as everybody will know by now, BBC Director General Tim Davie and CEO of News Deborah Turnus have resigned following criticism that a BBC Panorama documentary misled viewers by editing a speech by US President Donald Trump. Now, it has to be said there were a couple of other issues related to this that we'll get to a little bit later, but let's just have a look at what Panorama is said to have done. So the first clip here is what Trump actually said on the 6th of January 2021.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Okay, so that's what he said on the day, but this is what the BBC Panorama put out 1 week before people in the United States were due to vote in the presidential election 2024.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
So that was election interference, Ben, and but Britain doesn't do that, does it? It's only Russia does that. Isn't that what happens?
We are pure and perfect. We would never indulge with that kind of thing.
No, except that we did. Well, at least not us, of course, we stress. The BBC did, as did many, many others in the British media. We'll come on to why that might be in a second. But anyway, let's just have a look at a couple of things that were said in resignation comments. So here's Tim Davie. First of all, I wanted to let you know that I've decided to leave the BBC after 20 years. He said, this is entirely my decision. And I remain very thankful to the chair and the board for their unswerving and unanimous support throughout my entire tenure, including during recent days. So if he had their support, Ben, why was he so keen to leave? Okay, silence, because that seems like an obvious question.
I don't know.
But we might be asking. Sorry, let's come back to Tim Davie for a second. So he went on to say, you might be asking, why now? Why this moment? And his excuse was that the timing allows a new Director General to help shape the next charter, because, of course, the Royal Charter is up for renewal. And the question is whether the BBC is going to continue in its present form or not.
Yeah.
He said, I believe we are in a strong position to deliver growth. Now, Deborah Turnus, then, for her part, did at least acknowledge that it was the Trump thing, which was at least partly the reason for her departure. She said, I've never been more proud of the work that you do every day, speaking about other BBC News journalists. She, of course, was chief executive of BBC News. You really are the best of the best, she said. I've taken the difficult decision that it will no longer be my role to lead you in the collective vision that we all have, to pursue the truth with no agenda. The ongoing controversy around the Panorama and President Trump has reached a stage where it is causing damage to the BBC, an institution I love, she said. But she finished by saying, my plea to you, please keep the courage to continue our mission. She didn't, but everybody else has to, apparently. I'm only sorry, she said, that I won't be there to lead you and champion your brilliant journalism. Do you recognize the brilliant journalism that she's talking about?
No, absolutely not. And I'm amazed that it's this that has triggered this response. You think about all the things that have happened over the past 3, 4, 5 years, and it's this that's got them.
Well, is it that? Let's just see. So to come back to the question, to Davie's question of why now. Well, it's because of a story that The Telegraph published at the beginning of the month about a dossier written by Michael Prescott and sent to the BBC board. Now, Prescott was an independent advisor to the BBC's editorial guidelines and standards board for 3 years, and he left in June. He left apparently because the BBC didn't act on the dossier, and he seems to have taken it straight to the Telegraph, or it was, quotes, leaked to the Telegraph. Now, in it, Prescott says, 1 week before polling day in 2024, the BBC aired an hour-long panorama special called Trump, A Second Chance. He said, I watched the programme and found it to be neither balanced nor impartial. It seemed to be taking a distinctly anti-Trump stance. I raised my concerns at the EGSC, and David Grossman, the senior editorial advisor to the committee, was asked to review the programme. He went on to talk about the editing of the Trump speech, but the Trump speech wasn't all that was mentioned. And I do wonder if it was his mentioning of the war in Gaza, which is the real reason for the backlash here. Now, the Telegraph goes on to say that when Mr. Prescott turned his attention to coverage of Gaza, he and Mr. Grossman had looked into a report by a Telegraph colleague, Patrick Sawyer, about journalists reporting from BBC Arabic who expressed what the Telegraph describes as vile anti-Semitic views on social media. And he went on to say in his statement, on no other occasion in my professional life have I witnessed what I did at the BBC with regard to how management dealt with or failed to deal with serious recurrent problems. The Telegraph didn't let it go, of course, and so 2 senior BBC executives have fallen on their swords, and this was a more recent article by the Telegraph. I broke the BBC bias story, said the journalist concerned. Its silence proves there is a serious problem. So that's that. The Telegraph has been pushing this for the last few weeks. But the question for me is there any more here than an internal deep state spat? Because, we're talking about Trump, who's been at the receiving end of British deep state operations since 2016, actually. And of course, the whole Russiagate was led by Richard Dearlove and Christopher Steele and the British intelligence agencies. We should raise at this point long-standing reports of connections and cooperation between the BBC and British intelligence. So here's one example of it from UPI about BBC cooperation. New questions about BBC cooperation with British intelligence. Links to this will be in the show notes. But the Telegraph also has connections with British intelligence. Why spies and scribes have a lot in common, said Philip Knightley. This article, written by Philip Knightley, who's a veteran journalist, quotes Eric Downton, who's author of a book called Wars Without End, and someone Knightley describes as a legendary Canadian war correspondent who worked with Reuters and spent 24 years on the Daily Telegraph's foreign staff. And this is what he said, according to Eric Downton. During my time with Reuters and the Telegraph, I was appalled by the extent to which the British news media cooperated with MI5, the security service, and MI6, the Secret Intelligence Service, and this widespread use made of British foreign correspondence by SIX. Roy Pauly, foreign editor and later managing editor of the Telegraph, was a servile lackey to 5 and 6. Telegraph foreign correspondents were given direct orders to work with 6. When I went to Moscow for the Telegraph shortly after Stalin's death, I was ordered to work for the 6th man in the embassy, who had the usual cover of press attaché. Before I left London for Moscow, I was briefed by 6 officials on what they wanted me to do. And he finishes by saying the Times and the Telegraph, as I observed it, were particularly close to the intelligence services, but all the major British newspapers and the BBC apparently had degrees of symbiosis. Presumably, this sort of thing still goes on. Indeed, but not just with British intelligence, because at the beginning of the year, Mint Press featured BBC Middle East editor Rafi Berg as a CIA and Mossad collaborator. And so, the point here is, we have seen the media being used by the deep state for forever, in fact, and certainly 2016 to 2020, they certainly were pushing the Russiagate narrative with the full support of the British media right the way through that. And now we have this resulting in the resignation of 2 very senior BBC executives. And my question is this some kind of deep state effort to get control? I don't know the answer to that, but it's a question that needs to be asked.
It certainly does.
The next question that needs to be asked then, Ben, is will Tim Davie go to Channel 4? Because, of course, they also have lost their chief executive, Alex Mahon, who resigned earlier this year, and they're busy searching for a new CEO at the moment. Maybe he can go there.
I think Channel 5 is as well.
Okay, well, I don't know about Channel 5.
Three out of the four big broadcast networks. I couldn't
find any evidence that Channel 5 had
actually. Oh, right, okay.
So, but anyway, nonetheless, these are interesting questions, and perhaps we need to be looking in these directions.
Certainly, yeah. And there's not really that many people who can do these jobs. Like they are, as awful as the BBC is, it's quite a complicated thing to run an organisation like that. So finding people who've got the capacity to do it, and also be quite so heavily compromised by the intelligence apparatus and all the other stuff that they have to put up with is quite a tricky task. You might be looking at the deliberate controlled demolition of the British broadcasting system.
It's quite possible.
Yes.
But what about public interest media in general then?
Yes, well, I mean, this is a global issue, right? And we can talk about this controlled demolition idea a bit more in extra because I think there's something to that. But this is not just an issue that's at play in the UK. The war for the narrative really is the primary battleground of the global conflict. It's the reason why UK Column exists. It's why we've been doing what we've been doing for nearly 20 years now. And things are ramping up. And I've actually got a little bit of good news for you, which we'll come to in this next segment, which is all to do with something snappily named as the Paris Declaration on Multilateral Action for Information Integrity and Independent Media. And
I'm impressed with how you rolled that up.
Yeah, I've been practicing all weekend.
Yeah.
And it all centres around this organisation, International Fund for Public Interest Media. I'll call it IFPIM, for that is what they call themselves. We talked about them a little bit previously. I spoke about them in February, and then they're also mentioned back in 2023. I'll put some links so you can go and have a look at those reports with a bit more background. But essentially, according to them, we fund public interest media for everyone because independent journalism has never mattered more. Now, you will probably note the slight paradox here, the conflict between the two statements, that we fund public interest media for everyone because independent journalism has never mattered more. And when they say independent media, that means media dependent on lavish funding from corporations, states, and billionaire-backed foundations. So states like Denmark, France, Estonia, Sweden, foundations like Ford, Luminate, the Rockefellers are obviously in the game there, Google and Microsoft, who are both part of the Trusted News Initiative. NED, yes, which was basically set up because it got a bit embarrassing when the CIA got caught funding all sorts of organisations around the world. So they just set up NED instead to do it for them. And last week, so this is who's behind IFPIM, this is paying their bills. Last week in Paris, Nishwant Lalwani, who's the chief executive of IFPIM, went on a grand tour to Gay Paris for a big handshake with Monsieur le Président Emmanuel Macron for a high-level conference where 29 countries adopted a new declaration, which I'll come back to in a minute. And Macron announced a further €10 million for IFPIM. This is an extravagantly well-funded organisation. And Nishant's boss, Mark Thompson, was there, former Director General of the BBC, amongst other things. He was beating the drum for public interest media, saying that reliable information is a public good. It needs to be supported and funded on that basis. That was important wording there. So reliable information is a public good. That was a key piece of the agreement that came out of the high-level conference. But he was also, interestingly, sounding a note of not just caution, but I would also say alarm about the fact that the information war is currently being lost. Let's have a listen.
And be under no illusion, we are in a real battle here. And it's a battle which is currently being lost in most countries. My day job, as Amelie said, I run the international news organisation CNN. Before that, I ran the New York Times and the BBC. I want to say every day in my working life, I can feel this battle raging. It comes up every day. I talk to my friends in other international news organisations and domestic media in many countries. I've got contacts in many, many countries around the world. And by the way, not just the first world, but around the world. And with IFPIM, I see it. It's happening everywhere. And we are losing.
Good, eh?
Yeah, that is impressive.
That's quite emphatic.
Yeah.
They, I should say, are losing. We are on the other side of that. And according to him, we are winning, which is fantastic, despite the fact that they've got gazillions of dollars to fund this whole thing. And the levers of power in CNN that he currently runs, he's the CEO and the editor-in-chief of CNN. There's no separation of powers there at all. It's an amazingly powerful position for him, right?
Absolutely. And of course, it doesn't matter how much money you've got, you can't make the lies the truth.
Well, this is the thing. It's a force of nature, the truth, as they say. And they can't fight it, but they are going to continue to try. And their solution to this is the same thing that they always do, right? Which is to issue a declaration. That's what they've got. They think if they write it down hard enough, then that will change things, basically. So they issued this Paris Declaration. We'll provide a link. It's on the Elysee website. Worth going to read this, not too long, but I'll just summarise some of the key points. So this is said declaration. I won't read out the name again. You can see it on the top of the screen there. And essentially, they declared that independent media is a public good. They tell us that the world is facing an economic, social, and environmental set of challenges. They declare that the decline in information integrity in one part of the world affects all of us. So this is kind of this sort of interconnectedness thing that they're constantly pushing. They call for national and global action as well as multi-stakeholder cooperation. They love that word, multilateral, multi-stakeholder. I think it's in this document about 20 times. It's all grounded in UN policy, so it's governed by the United Nations Global Principles for Information Integrity. It talks about interconnected challenges that I spoke about a moment ago. They welcome, very specifically, they name International Fund for Public Interest Media. That's a named organisation in this communique, amongst a few others. And they are committing themselves to sustained public support based on multilateral and multi-stakeholder collaboration as an issue of national and collective security, and that's going to require coordination across, again, multilateral, intergovernmental, and again, multi-stakeholder institutions. And this is all they've got for themselves, as far as I can tell. I'll draw your attention specifically to Clause 7. I thought this was particularly interesting, which is what they say is mainstreaming information integrity as a cross-cutting theme, which is basically propagandizing the population at every level to understand that the information is a national security issue. And basically saying, recognising the importance of access to reliable information as a condition for achieving wider policy goals. Everything hinges on this, including social welfare, gender equality, crises and conflict resolution, inequality reduction, strengthening democratic norms, national security, promoting transparency, exposing illicit financial flows. They're definitely not interested in that, and combating corruption. And of course, importantly, addressing the impacts of climate change, which is the unifying theme that ties all this stuff together, as Sandi and I are going to talk about a bit more later on in the show. This is signed by 29 countries, including the French, Australia, Estonia, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Ukraine, and the UK. So we've signed up to this, obviously. They're going to be working in partnership with civil society, media, academia, all of them, of course, committed to media freedom. And they actually referenced a few other organisations. One of them was this one, which really tickled me. This is the Media Freedom Coalition, right? Because nothing screams media freedom more than clandestine groups of unelected officials sitting in dimly lit conference rooms deciding what is and isn't true. Just look at that picture.
How many of them have 5 or 6 involved in their job titles?
Yes, well, quite, exactly. And it's directly controlled by UNESCO. So actually all of this sort of it's independent. It's like, no, everything's cascading down from the UN and you're just playing along, right? And they expect people to go along with this for some reason. And they can't see how this is completely incredible, as in it's unbelievable, So no wonder they're losing.
Thank you for that, Ben. Okay, let's move on then. And Diane, welcome you to the programme. And we do take a look at parliamentary legislation from time to time. And the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill is at the top of your list.
Yes, thanks, Mike. Hello, it's great to be here today, everyone. I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on with the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill. I previously reported on this back in the 6th of January, 2025. So it's gone through the House of Commons. It's now sort of in the reporting stage in the House of Lords, and there's really no expectation whatsoever that this will not get passed. Part of what happened as this bill has been in development under the Labour government and Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, and the other sort of government officials that are involved in this, is that they have involved a large amount of consultation, as they're saying, public consultation, but mostly the so-called experts, in particular the academics. And so in just recently, what happened was this report that was commissioned by the government to have a so-called independent curriculum assessment. So what needs to be taught specifically in England going forward, which will be mandatory to teach all children under this Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, which is expected to go into place in the next year. And then the new national curriculum, as being proposed right now, will take effect in September 2028 to give schools some time to prepare. The issue here, of course, is that there are a lot of problems with the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill. It causes a lot of problems for people who want to homeschool their children, for people who have different types of schools. And the idea is that basically there will be a national curriculum that everyone has to be taught under what is being proposed here. And so this is what I want to go into a little bit more today, is the result of this report and who is behind this report and what's going on with it. So the documentation for all of the policy documents in the report, as well as on the government website, is available in the show notes. The final report is available here. This is the one that is led by Professor Becky Francis, CBE, who I'm going to be getting into later on in this report. But there's so much in this. It's a 200-page report with appendices and so on. So I want to kind of get at what they're saying is the basics of what they want to do with the school curriculum starting in 2028. But I have some aspects that I want to look at in particular, because there's so much to look at. But I think there are some issues that our audience will be particularly interested in. So looking at this, we can see the NGA, which is the National Membership Association for Governors, Trustees, Governance Professionals in England, State Schools and Trusts. What's going on here is that there are several issues that they have outlined by the NGA in this blog post, which says will take effect again in 2028. The first one is what's called a stronger focus on skills and non-core subjects. So we're not really sure exactly what that means, but if you look at it, it basically they're saying, well, we are going to be teaching things that are not maybe maths, English, things that would have traditionally been considered core curriculum are going to be changing. This includes building a more inclusive curriculum. So a theme that runs throughout the review's recommendations, as it says, reflecting the sector's desire for a curriculum in which every pupil can see their own life, culture, and experiences represented. This recommends updating all programs of study to better represent the diversity of modern society. So we're seeing the diversity, equity, inclusion agenda coming in already. Reforming exams and qualifications. So one of the things that they're talking about is having fewer exams, making exams maybe not so difficult because of the anxiety it causes students. So never mind the fact that exams have been around for so long and they are considered to be part of education. They want to, when they say reform them, they actually mean reduce them and make them a bit simpler for everyone, especially those who come from different backgrounds. Reducing high stakes accountability. So we don't need accountability. Apparently we need less. And then finally, they're talking about strengthening vocational qualifications, which includes a new third pathway, which they call V levels at level 3, which will offer new technical pathways. So if you go into the actual report, and those are the basics that have been outlined, sort of the major headlines as part of this, what they're saying when you go into some of the details about this is that they are applying social justice, which you can already see in what I've introduced with the diversity, equity, inclusion. They also actually admit in the report that England's performance in education has fallen over time, and they put in there, especially during the pandemic. If you look at our series that is ongoing with Hugh McCarthy, who's been uncovering the issues of lockdowns for what's happened during the COVID era, when we had children locked up and down in schools, that we can see there was a major impact on education and social development and just everything related to what was happening to the children and not being able to go to school. So it goes on to say that they have applied a social justice lens to all aspects of our work. It talks about it's not inclusive to have certain methods of assessment that we know about already, talking about we need to look at performance measures. Incentivizing particular behaviors may be beneficial, but also have unintended consequences. So now we're seeing the traditional approaches to behavior change might be looking at a little bit differently what is available, what is not available to students in terms of how they're being assessed from the traditional forms that we're all aware of. They also talk a lot about the rise of AI. We have to teach students how to use AI. They talk quite a bit about the climate crisis, bringing wide-ranging urgent challenges to address. There's a lot of issue in this about the climate crisis, teaching them about sustainability, teaching them about, which would then be UN Sustainable Development Goals, of course. So that level of indoctrination with all of our schools going on. Talking about RSHE, which is the relationships, sex, and health education, which of course is the sexualization of children, indoctrinating them into sexual content and other things that we shouldn't be, in my opinion, showing to children, which a lot of people, including Commissioner Wood, have covered in detail as well and are continuing to work against. They talked about identifying and protecting against misinformation. So that's interesting, because what is misinformation? And now that we've just had this report about the BBC and what's happening there, this includes, for example, anti-vaccine campaigns and climate change denial is what they will be teaching students is misinformation, and as well as unverified claims online. Well, who's doing the verification? Is it full fact? Who's doing that? Who's doing that claiming? That's what we need to look at. They talked about issues of believing in conspiracy theories, that this is a problem. And so a whole lot, again, about the climate crisis and how this is all going to be put into the new geography curriculum about climate education and sustainability. So what's behind all of this? If we go back to Professor Becky Francis, who I said is has been heading up this report, let's look at her academic profile. She has a background, we can read her entire biographical statement there. She has published especially on social equality, social identities, and education. So the issue of identity politics, gender theory, longstanding interest in improving social justice within and support for state education. If you look at a few of her papers and her background here, I thought it was interesting to note that the UCL, which is her university, says that she has Sustainable Development Goals 4, quality education, and SDG 10, reduced inequalities, because all universities now have to report which SDGs they fall under at this point. And I've just got a few of her example papers we can go through quickly, just so that you can see the titles of some of these papers. A missing piece of the puzzle, exploring whether science capital and STEM identity are associated with STEM study at university. So this is her most recent paper, one of her most recent papers just from last year. Femininity, science, and the denigration of the girly girl. So hyperfemininity, feminine, masculine, all about gender again. Okay, so that's 2016. Back in 2013, we have the submergence and reemergence of gender in undergraduate accounts of university experience, gender and education. So how does gender emerge, submerge? I have no idea. We go on to the next paper, 2010, gender monoglossia, gender heteroglossia, the potential of Bakhtin's work for reconceptualizing gender in the Journal of Gender Studies. This was a funded project titled The Gender Subjectivities of High Achieving Pupils. And she was the principal investigator. And I had another video about Bakhtin, but I think maybe we'll look at that in extra time. We're running short on time. But basically, I just wanted to say that Mikhail Bakhtin was fundamental to the work that she is doing. He's been fundamental in developing educational theories. He was from Russia, and he is, in some circles, considered to be a Marxist. And so we're seeing now that sort of where this is all coming from is that it goes back to a very certain view of education, and he's important in education because a lot of these theorists and gender critical people, and well, not gender critical people, gender inclusive people, I guess we could say, they're all basically saying that we need to change education and the way it's done fundamentally, because this will then therefore promote this type of very progressive ideology that these professors are promoting. So I just wanted the audience to be able to see what is actually at the core behind what is being going to be taught to schools in England starting from 2028, Mike.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for that. We will talk much more about that in extra, no doubt. Okay, if you like what the UK column does, you would like to support us, you can do that by having a look at the relevant page. The link is on the front page of the UK column website. We do need your ongoing financial support. If you can't support us financially, please do at least share our material, because that helps defeat the censorship agenda, which we'll be coming on to later in the programme. Okay, a light-hearted germ warfare tonight. Germ is asking his guest, why do men go bald? I think, Ben, you and I would like to answer.
Yeah, why has he asked this lady with the lovely hair? Why is he not talking to us?
Well, I notice he's wearing a cap, but I'll say no more about
that. You think he's worried?
Anyway, tonight that's at 7 p.m. tonight. Tonight at 9 p.m. Carl Zha is talking about China's AI dominance being inevitable and answering why that is. So you can make your own decision if you have a look at that tonight. The third episode of 1,000 Words podcast with James Dellingpole is up on the website at the moment. It did get some controversial comments in the chat box, got everybody going last night. So if you haven't seen that yet, do have a look. And Diane, very briefly, Cumbria against government betrayal.
Yes, thanks, Mike. So the last 2 weeks, I've been to speaking at successful events, both in Newcastle and in County Durham just this past weekend. So this Saturday, I'll be speaking at another event in Cumbria, and all of these have been focusing on digital ID and raising awareness and community building. So I'm looking forward to seeing people in Carlisle on Saturday afternoon, if possible. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Now, let's move on then, and we'll stay on the topic of schools. But Sandi, welcome to the programme. What happens if schools are locked down?
Well, I wasn't really aware that this was happening until someone drew my attention to it. Someone from Norfolk, because their school seems to be preparing for lockdowns, and so are many schools in the UK. There are documents showing that UK schools have formal lockdown, or they call it evacuation or lockdown policies that explicitly state children will not be released to parents or carers while the lockdown is in effect. Now, this could create fear and anxiety amongst children and parents. It also gives the state agency over parents, which is a bit of a worry. I've included links, obviously, to this in the show notes. Now, can we go back to the other slide that you flagged up just there? Yeah, the organisation, which is the National Association of Schoolmasters Union of Women Teachers, UK, has guidance on school lockdown procedures, and they state, unlike fire procedures, this will most likely require evacuation to a safe area. The guidance applies to all schools in the UK, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. The guidance mentions that the purpose is to protect children and staff from terrorist, extremist weapons attack until the police arrive, and more generally, where the safety of staff and pupils could be at risk. Now, this is all quite chilling, actually. A further guidance from Hampshire County Council entitled Guidance to Support Schools in Managing Lockdown Procedures says, in the case of any lockdown instance, schools are encouraged to communicate at the earliest opportunity with the local authority for advice on, sort of no release to parents. And obviously in some of these documents, it actually has a sort of a lockdown template that schools can use to go along with this. There's another a policy document from one school, King Edward Primary School, a nursery, clearly states under its lockdown policy, pupils should not be released to parents during a lockdown. Parents will wait for us to contact you about when it's safe to collect your child and when and where this should be from. It also means that there's currently no access in or out of the building. Parents will be informed not to contact the school. Contacting the school will block the school's telephone lines when they're needed. So this document, explicitly sets out that during the lockdown, the school will not permit children to go home or be collected by their parents until the all clear. And if you look at King Edward's School document, I have included it in the show notes, you'll see that there's a partner NGO called Transform, which is all about trusting in this plan. Which is a little bit this is the slide for that one, and it's about together we achieve trust, and it's all about trusting, and that was associated directly with the King Edward School in Norfolk's plan for lockdown. So from a legal point of view, can a school refuse to let a parent pick up their child if there's an emergency? And according to this blog in a law firm called Frettons, absolutely yes. You're not. The school can dictate that you don't pick your child up from school. So the existence of these school-level policies means that the practice is not hypothetical. Individual schools do plan for the scenario that children will remain in school and are not released to parents during a lockdown event. And if you wish to assess, how widespread these policies are, you need to check your local authority guidance and multi-academy trust policies or your school handbooks, because, across the regions, England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland do see a consistency, but will have differences in the way they approach this. Now, several schools were involved in this. There is obviously King Edward Primary School and Nursery in Norfolk, Amblecote Primary in Dudley, Bow Community School in Devon, Welshpool High School in Powys, where parents may be instructed not to collect their children, and pupils will not be released to parents during the lockdown. And there's Singlewell School in Kent. So it seems like this is a real sort of a bit of a step too far, and it's predicated on an unknown threat that could even be manipulated. We don't know. And in any threatening incident, children need to be with their parents, in my view, and parents need to be with their children. So it's quite concerning.
Thank you, Sandi. Okay, let's move on then to online safety. And the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, is usually rolled out when we start talking about these kinds of things because, of course, she is Culture Secretary, but she is apparently very scared about what her 10-year-old sees on the internet. Don't give him a phone then, Lisa. That would be the advice I would give. But anyway, Lisa is trying to convince everyone here that the Online Safety Act is fit for purpose, but that we shouldn't worry because the Starmer regime is ready to provide further legislation if necessary. Now, what of course builds this narrative? Well, let's have a look at this. This is from civil society. It's reporting that the Molly Rose Foundation, which is a long-standing campaign organisation for online safety legislation, has received £2 million of donations from Meta and Pinterest, both of whom were named in the inquest into Molly Russell's death. Now, Ben, my question to you then is, do you think it's appropriate for a charity campaigning for stronger regulation of social media platforms to be taking money from those same platforms?
I think that might be a conflict of interest.
Do you think so?
I think it might be.
The Molly Rose Foundation says that they also receive money from anonymous donors that they have decided that they're not going to acknowledge because they want to remain anonymous. So,
okay, sounds legit.
Okay. But in the meantime, I've got some good news for everyone because Full Fact is in financial trouble. Full Fact recently announced that it was urgently refocusing its fundraising efforts, according to this article, following Google's decision to stop funding it in January. Now, Full Fact criticized Meta last January, for ending its partnership then with fact checkers in the United States. And Full Fact are saying fact checkers have never seen a threat like this. So when we consider that Tim Davey, Mark Thompson was saying that the battle is lost.
Yes.
Is this yet another example of that? If social media companies are defunding fact checkers and Full Fact considers that fact checkers have never seen a threat like this?
I guess it is, yeah. I mean, I struggle with these kind of communications. They've been making a lot of noise about this online. The CEO of Full Fact has been talking about this, as you'd expect, since it happened, right? But they've got a big fundraising push going on. But I just feel in the background that they're still all kind of coordinating with each other. Do you know what I mean?
I've no doubt. There's no reason.
Like Google, they might not be giving you $1 million, but you're still working together.
That is true. Well, look, in the meantime, Unheard has been lauding the success of the Online Safety Act here in stopping Brits from accessing pornography. Now, this article is by Josephine Bartosh, who's often heavily criticised for being an anti-trans commentator and campaigner, but she's more of a campaigner for women's rights, and it's clear she considers pornography to be a bad thing, and I don't particularly disagree with that. But anyway, she's excited in this article that Pornhub has claimed that their British audience has fallen by 77%. And so everyone on the right of politics should be celebrating. But this is complete nonsense. First of all, the 77% figure comes from Pornhub themselves, who have an interest in convincing the authorities that the steps that have been taken to so-called protect children are working. Because they don't want any further regulation. Secondly, no one to date has done any significant research on the actual use of VPNs, as virtual private networks, to circumvent the age assurance scheme. And Ofcom isn't doing that work because they equally want to convince us all that the age assurance works. So everybody's got an agenda here, and the 77% is therefore nonsense because it can't be proved. And Bartosh is simply misleading her leadership, in my opinion, by reinforcing that claim. But the other thing she's doing is ignoring the elephant in the room, which continues to be that adults are still absolutely able to pose as children on websites aimed at children. So it should be no surprise then that in Texas, Attorney General Ken Paxton says he is suing Roblox, however you pronounce that, over flagrantly ignoring safety laws and deceiving parents about the dangers that Roblox poses to young people. He said that Roblox is a, quote, breeding ground for predators, accusing them of putting pixel pedophiles and corporate profit over the safety of children in Texas. Now, last year, Roblox announced that it's going to block under 13s from messaging others on the platform unless a parent or guardian grants permission. How do they even know what age the kids are? They don't. And just make the point, finally, that Roblox is banned in some countries, including Turkey, over the risk of grooming. So perhaps Josephine Bartosh should consider this rather than celebrating age assurance, which is no more than a front for digital ID and has nothing whatever to do with protecting children or adults, for that matter, from pornography. But anyway, where does that take us? We're building the ultimate trading business, Ben. Who's building the ultimate trading business?
Someone's building the automated trading business. Yeah, this is Quadrature. Let's get that up on screen. We can see this. The ultimate automated trading business. You'll note there's no people in this video at all. We talked about Quadrature previously. This is a trading business, algorithmic trading business based in the City of London and the Cayman Islands, highly tax efficient. And it's part of a network of international capital, ruling class families, Zionist groups, UK government-backed supposed NGOs and international corporations, many of them linked to the World Economic Forum, who are funding and enabling a basically astroturf neo-Marxist revolution to bring in a completely new system of governance in response primarily to this supposed climate crisis. The climate crisis, we've got to change everything in response to it. And Quadrature are right at the centre. It's basically they call it the ultimate automated trading business. This is like a perpetual profit generating machine. I think they've got a huge data analytics system that basically tells them if X, then Y across the whole economy, and they just sit there taking a skim off everything. And it's completely opaque. It's a black box trading system. It's based in the Cayman Islands, so super tax efficient. And it's actually described by people in the industry as being a bit of a cult, right? So we can just see that up on screen. It's a bit of a cult. We have spoken about them previously. I'll put a link to some of the recent reports. And it's the cult that's run by these two fellas, Greg Skinner and Sunil Setia, who are big time maths and science guys, finance backgrounds. They've been running this for about a decade now. They're very politically active, including by throwing loads of money at the Labour Party, which they did last year. I'm going to say it was just bad luck that they gave it to the Labour Party in the window where they didn't have to declare it before the general election. I'll give Keir Starmer the benefit of the doubt, right?
Of course.
Yeah, of course. I think we should do that. But they're not just giving it to politicians. They're also throwing it into an extraordinary number of different supposedly charitable organisations around the world. A lot of that is being driven out of this thing, which is the Quadrature Climate Foundation, which they established in 2019. So it's been going for 6 years now. And they're basically saying that the new climate reality demands unprecedented climate action. It's run by its trustees, including the 2 Quadrature founders. But it gets really interesting when you go and look at the advisory board, because you've got Rachel Kite, who's the UN climate envoy from the UK, who absolutely will be at COP. So like she's straddling that kind of public-private thing perfectly. Jeremy Oppenheim, founder of Systemic, which is basically ideas and capital. They talk about disrupting global economic systems to introduce new models that make them a lot of money. Danny, I'm going to say this wrong, Swiss Kandaraja, I think I got that right, who's the chief executive of something called the New Economics Foundation, which again is just neo-Marxist, statist rubbish. Like if you go and look at a lot of this, the material, it makes no sense from a kind of classic economic perspective. He's also was formerly director of the Royal Commonwealth Society. So a lot of this is very, very closely linked into the British Commonwealth. And as an extension of that, I think Sandy's going to talk about the Paris Climate Agreement in a minute. That was basically developed by the Commonwealth and then implemented by the UN. Commonwealth is extremely influential in this space. And that's overseen by Charles III, who's the head of the Commonwealth. And if we can just get that back up on screen, the other trustee, the advisory board member of note was Emily Shukba, who's a climate scientist from Cambridge University. She also co-authored the Ladybird Book of Climate Change with Charles III, because they're just absolutely going after kids at the moment. So they're putting shed loads of money into lots of international groups, so over $1 billion, 234 organisations, some of them of note. Rockefeller Foundation, so putting money into the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. A thing called Southall Black Sisters, $4 million over 3 years to this organisation, Southall Black Sisters, based up in West London. So kind of community organising group. Also got the Club of Rome. Right at the pinnacle of the whole climate agenda at the bottom there, you can see they give them $500,000. The New Economics Foundation, which is actually run by one of the people on their advisory board, that kind of conflict of interest term coming back into play maybe. IPPR, progressive think tank, $4 million. E3G, couple $100,000 to run Climate Action Week. And then the London School of Economics. This fund called the Amalgamated Charitable Fund, this is Black Feminist Fund, $10 million over 3 years. They're putting into this fund up in North America. And importantly, for the purposes of today, this thing, Civic Power Fund. This is to support community organising infrastructure for UK climate resilience. All right, just going to have a look at them, shall we? So this is their website. We can achieve so much more when we're organised. Community organising. This is Saul Alinsky. Yeah, this is radical Marxist revolutionary organising being funded by international capital. Right, and it's all across the UK. They talk about their strategy being around organising people, building sort of civic infrastructure, funding the mechanics for doing this on-the-ground work, putting new leaders into place who obviously have nothing to do with traditional leadership structures here in the UK. As I said, they're all around the country. Particular focused on North Manchester, North Wales, Hampshire and Surrey, but they're absolutely everywhere. And as I said, they've been given the thick end of £3 million for the next 3 years. And that's just from this one foundation. Let's have a quick look at the team, because this is where it gets particularly interesting, because this is a network ultimately. So we'll provide a link. You can have a look at it for yourself. The one that jumped out at me was this. You got Nick Lowles from Hope Not Hate. I think, or was it Hate Not Hope? I always get it mixed up, but they're backed by the Home Office. We're in their State of Hate thing every year, right? Like it's very clear what their agenda is, and they're in the same network as. Let's have a little look. Alistair Murray's the Director of External Affairs from KPMG, which is a strategic partner of the World Economic Forum. It's funny that, isn't it? It doesn't seem to make sense how all of these things go together, but they do. And then just the final one for today's purposes, and I'm really just skimming the surface here, Citizens UK, which is vice-chaired by this lady, Nalene Cohen, who's also the chair of the Elith Synagogue in northwest London, which is connected to a bunch of Zionist organisations, which is a very, very common theme in this area. And you can see a bunch of those other foundation groups at the bottom there who are ploughing money into this whole thing. And just to summarise, let's just bring those back onto screen. You've got this Civic Power Fund, which is a neo-Marxist community organising group being lavishly funded by the Quadrature Climate Foundation, which is connected to the King and a whole bunch of other people, supported through the networks of Hope Not Hate, KPMG and the World Economic Forum, Citizens UK. Essentially, this is Zionism writ large, driving towards community organisation in the name of supposed democracy, but is ultimately driving what I think is going to be a neo-Marxist revolution, is what's coming down the track for us here in the UK, not just here, everywhere. This is the landscape that we're dealing with at the moment.
Thank you for that, Sandi. Let's come back to you then, and you got a bit more on COP30.
Yes. I mean, further to what you covered on Friday, I've just been looking really at the COP conference and what they've got sort of 6 items that they want to address at the conference this year. And the UN have said that these 6 issues will dominate this conference. So the number one of the issues is how to prevent runaway global warming, they're calling it again, which is interesting. I thought it was climate change, but they've gone back to the 1990s and they're calling it global warming. The second one is how to protect communities from climate impacts. Number 3 is how to make good on $1 trillion promise. This is what it's really about. It's really about all the money, follow the money. Number 4, how to leverage creative solutions to the climate crisis. Number 5 is how to ensure fair and inclusive transitions. And number 6, now this one made me laugh, how to capture the mojo of Paris. And they're nostalgically looking back to the Paris Climate Conference in 2015 and thinking, oh gosh, if only we could have people on board in the same way as they were then, which is quite interesting. Now, the Brazilian president, Lula da Silva, on Tuesday, he put forward his vision for how the Amazon rainforest should be protected, a future that didn't depend on donations from wealthy nations and large philanthropies, but instead included a major fund that paid countries to keep forests standing. Now, this is how they're going to do it. And he says, I don't want to say the word donation any longer. He told reporters ahead of the United Nations summit. He said, if someone gives us 50 million, it's nice, but that's nothing, he said. We need billions to deal with our problems of people who are living there. Now, as I go on, this will kind of unfold. Now, his tropical, he's got this idea that they're focusing on basically they're focusing on the financial-isation of the rainforests worldwide, and this is a reason they've met at Belém, and it's a town very ill-equipped to deal with this huge influx of people. So the initiative, the Tropical Rainforest Forever Fund, is aiming to support more than 70 developing countries that commit to preservation so far. That's Colombia, Ghana, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Indonesia and Malaysia. They've all joined. I've put all this in the show notes. Let's see in this next video how the UNEP program described the Forests Forever facility.
Introducing the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, a new finance mechanism that puts real, lasting value on standing forests, giving tropical forest countries long-term incentives to continue their efforts to preserve these landscapes. We will raise $25 billion in sovereign investment and philanthropy, and $100 billion from private investors to create a $125 billion fund. This large-scale, long-term fund grows through smart, diversified investments, generating higher returns, with annual profits going to tropical forest countries at a fixed rate for every hectare of standing forest. With performance tracked by satellite technology, The Tropical Forest Forever facility will reward those who have slowed down deforestation below the world average and pay them to maintain their standing forest.
So there you have it. I mean, it's very much about the financialization of nature, and who will benefit from that? Certainly not the people of Brazil, that's for sure. Now, I'd like to just draw your attention to this document, which is included in the show notes, and it's called The False Solution. And it's by Mary Louise Malig, and she's a researcher and policy analyst and campaigner, and she's currently the policy director of the Global Forest Coalition. I've put this in the show notes. I don't know if I mentioned that. She's written on the issues of trade, particularly the World Trade Organization and digital trade. So who holds the purse strings in all of this? Not the people who live in those forests, but a board dominated by the donor nations, corporate sponsors and multilateral banks. This is what the Rainforest Foundation UK and Global Forest Coalition are calling the false solution, a system that financialises nature, centralises control and sidelines Indigenous and local voices. Let's have a look at this. Step one is the countries apply to join the TFF, which is the Forest Forever facility. And satellites and data algorithms monitor their forest cover in real time. And if the canopy loss stays below a certain percentage, the country receives payment. A minimum of 20% of funds might go to the local Indigenous communities, but the rest flows through government ministries and investment funds. And so the concept paper says the facility does not rely on donor grants, but generates competitive market returns for sponsor investors. That means nature is being securitized and turned into a product with a financial yield. It's also worth noting that the fund will be likely to be hosted by a multilateral development bank, possibly the World Bank, giving supranational institutions new powers over sovereign and land management. Now, this isn't a grassroots stewardship. It's sort of governance by algorithm and big money corporations, public-private partnerships. And I'd just like to flag the 4 areas of control, which is really looking at the long term, how long this has been going on, because in the 1960s and to the 80s. This was actually just called development. This is before the United Nations got involved. And it was highways and dams and logging. And it was colonization by the World Bank and the IMF and USAID and the military of Brazil. And it was really about opening the Amazon for extraction. Now, in the 1990s, it became sustainable development. And that was backed by the UN treaties, Agenda 21, the Earth Summit, Club of Rome. And that was all about globalist environmental governance. Now, we got to the 2000s, and it's climate and biodiversity protection, which is, again, it's Agenda 21 or 2030, carbon, markets and land use restrictions, and to monetize ecosystems. And then from 2015 onwards, when we had the 17 sustainable goals, it's net zero, ESGs, SDGs, WEF, BlackRock, World Government, and the IMF and the World Bank. Again, digital carbon accounting, green finance, greenwashing, carbon offsetting. And this all consolidates in the technocratic control and over the economies of the land and of the people. So this is all about greenwashing, and who makes the money? The banks do, and the big boys. Now, I just want to go to Ed Miliband, because this made me laugh a little bit. Ed Miliband, he looks like he's tearing his hair out here. He's at the climate conference, and he's saying giving up would be a betrayal. Miliband says that 1.5 degrees C target still is alive before the COP conference, but it would be really funny to just listen to his little interview with Sky News, because he's clearly worried about all this. So if we could just have that clip, please.
Ed Miliband, who joins me now Secretary of State, is this a tougher gig than usual? To a lot of your political opponents and quite a few voters, you're seen as the guy who's sort of putting up bills, net zero is expensive, and he now to fly to Brazil to a climate summit. I can see the headlines being difficult for you. Is it hard?
Well, I actually don't buy that's where the public is. That's where sections of parties in British politics are. But I think what people know is that energy bills went up and have stayed high because of our reliance on fossil fuels when Russia invaded Ukraine. The right way to bring them down is to drive forward with low carbon, homegrown energy that we control. That's what this government is rightly focused on. And I think what you see here at COP, frankly, is countries carrying on moving on clean energy because they see it as a massive opportunity for jobs. They see it as a route to energy security, and they believe it's the right thing to do for future generations as well.
But give me a sense of the feeling, because you're in corridors that I'm not permitted in. I mean, the Prime Minister spoke about that consensus fracturing. Obviously, the position of the Trump administration and America's attitude, it has had, I can feel some of the heat coming out of this process and a feeling that the momentum is possibly being lost. And your plans don't really work unless everyone else is on board too. How concerned are you?
Well, look, first of all, we're doing the right thing for Britain. 400,000 new clean energy jobs as a result of our plans by 2030. It's the right way to get bills down.
Well, there he was digging himself into a very deep hole, in my opinion. And have our bills gone down? No, they haven't. And do renewables work? No, they don't. Back to you.
No, indeed. And we can talk more about that in extra as well. Very briefly, Diane, let's just end the programme with back to the BBC, in fact.
Yeah, since we started with the BBC, I guess we should finish with the BBC today. The BBC has upheld what they're calling impartiality complaints, 20 of them, over the way presenter Martine Croxall altered a script she was reading live on the BBC News channel. And that's according to their wording. Let's take a look at this clip.
Malcolm Mystery, who was involved in the research, says that the aged, pregnant people, women, and those with pre-existing health conditions need to take precautions.
So she had these 20 complaints, and they were all upheld recently by the BBC's Executive Complaints Unit over her facial expression. So you can no longer make a certain face without getting 20 complaints against you, saying that it was violating their laws of impartiality, basically. Of course, we did have lots of people on the other side, which was mentioned in this article, saying that there were people who congratulated her for expressing views on this, including J.K. Rowling, who posted on X that she has a new favorite BBC presenter. So it's very unfortunate. We all know how, as I certainly know, how stressful it is to go through these complaints, even when you're trying to stand up for what you believe to be reality. But I thought it was worth mentioning, considering that, what is impartiality now? We're seeing what's happened to the BBC just, in the past couple of days, really, Mike.
Yes, indeed. Well, look, Martine should be sacked for that, shouldn't she? I mean, other people get away with all kinds of much worse things on the BBC, but we don't need to worry about those. We got to censure people who make expressions. Absolutely. Yeah. I hope everybody realizes that was a sarcastic statement. We got to leave it there for today. What a news. We will talk more in extra. And if you're not a UK Call member and you can't join us for extra, you're missing out. So please do join us. See you then in a few minutes. Enjoy Jerm tonight and Carl Za as well. We'll have an interview tomorrow at 1 p.m. and we're back for the news at 1 p.m. on Wednesday. See you then. Bye-bye.